Welcome to Africa's Top Tier. For nearly 80 years, military coups have dramatically shaped the political landscapes of African nations. Some countries saw one or two, and others dozens. Today on Africa's Top Tier, we're counting down the top 10 African countries with the most coup events, for both failed and successful, from 1945 to 2024. At number 10, we have Uganda with a total of 14 coups. After gaining independence in 1962, Uganda's political landscape quickly deteriorated. In 1971, General Idi Amin staged a military coup while President Milton Obote was away, launching one of Africa's darkest dictatorships. Amin's regime became synonymous with state terror, with over 300,000 people were killed. The economy collapsed and international relations soured. When Amin was overthrown in 1979, peace didn't follow. Instead, Uganda fell into chaos with 5 different presidents in 6 years. Then in 1986, a new force emerged, Yoweri Museveni's National Resistance Army, which seized control after a 5-year guerrilla war. Museveni promised democratic reforms, but nearly 4 decades later, he is still in power, with accusations of authoritarianism mounting. Uganda's legacy of coups has left behind a political system where military strength often matters more than the ballot box. Number 9 takes us to Congo-Brazzaville, a country whose post-independence years were shaped by ideological warfare, foreign influence, and constant power grabs. After gaining independence from France in 1960, Congo's first president, Faure-Boutioulou, was overthrown in 1963, the first of many coups to come. What followed were decades of tension between Marxist-aligned military leaders and pro-Western civilian figures. These ideological clashes often played out violently, especially during the Cold War, when global superpowers fueled instability behind the scenes. In 1979, Denis Sassou Nguesso took power through a coup, beginning a cycle of exits and returns that still continues today. Even after a brief stint out of power in the 1990s, Sassou Nguesso returned during the 1997 civil war, backed by Angolan forces. He's remained in charge ever since, and Congo's repeated coups have created a deeply personalized regime where democracy exists mostly on paper and military alliances shape political survival. Coming in at number 8 is Ghana with a total of 15 coups, now one of Africa's most stable democracies but once a revolving door of military rulers. Ghana became the first sub-Saharan country to gain independence in 1957 under Kwame Nkrumah, a Pan-African icon. But in 1966, while Nkrumah was on a state visit to China and Vietnam, his government was overthrown by the military. What followed was 2 decades of political turbulence. The 1970s saw a series of military coups, each promising reform but delivering more instability. Then came Flight Lieutenant Jerry Rawlings. In 1979, he led a coup, handed over power to civilians, then returned in 1981 to seize control again, this time holding onto it for 11 years before transitioning to civil leadership. Remarkably, Rawlings became an elected president and helped stabilize the country's politics. Today, Ghana is seen as a democratic success story, but it took 15 coup events to get there. The military once ruled, now it watches from the sidelines. Number 7 on our list is Chad, with a total of 16 coups, a country where the military has never really left politics and where coups are more common than peaceful transitions. After independence in 1960, Chad quickly fell into internal conflict. The country's ethnic divisions between the largely Muslim North and Christian South fueled power struggles that exploded into civil war in the 1970s. Governments came and went, often at gunpoint. In 1990, General Idris Deby seized power after toppling President Hissène Habré. Deby ruled for 30 years, surviving attempted coups, rebel uprisings, and external attacks, often with French military support. His presidency ended the way it began, violently. He died on the battlefield in 2021, fighting rebels in the north. His son, Mahamat Deby, immediately took over in what many saw as a dynastic military succession. With 16 total coup events, Chad remains a country where the military isn't just a security force, it's the gateway to power. At number 6 is Guinea-Bissau, one of the smallest countries in Africa, but among the most politically unstable. Since gaining independence from Portugal in 1973, Guinea-Bissau has rarely enjoyed a full term of peaceful civilian governance. The military has staged multiple coups, backed mutinies, and even killed sitting presidents. Elections are held, but rarely finish uninterrupted, with leaders either arrested, overthrown, or forced to flee. With 16 coup events, including 8 direct attempts and 4 successful takeovers, Guinea-Bissau's politics operate in a near-constant state of emergency. Power rarely transitions here. It's taken usually by force. At number 5 is Burundi, a country whose political story has been written by ethnic divisions, assassinations, and one of the highest numbers of successful coups in Africa. Burundi gained independence in 1962, and almost immediately, tensions erupted between its two main ethnic groups, the Hutu and Tutsi. In the decades that followed, the military, often dominated by one group, became both a weapon and a ruler. Presidents were overthrown, others were assassinated, and power was frequently seized in the wake of bloodshed. One of the most pivotal events came in 1993 when Melchior Ndadaye, the country's first democratically elected Hutu president, was assassinated just months after taking office. His murder triggered a brutal civil war that lasted over a decade and left hundreds of thousands dead. Even after peace agreements were signed in the 2000s, Burundi's politics remained volatile. In 2015, President Pierre Nkurunziza's bid for a third term sparked a failed coup attempt and deadly protests. The military continues to loom large behind the scenes, and with 8 successful coups, it has more than once decided who lives, who rules, and who runs. Coming in at number 4 is Sierra Leone, where coups and conflict walked hand in hand, and where young soldiers once ruled the country. After independence in 1961, Sierra Leone drifted into authoritarianism and one-party rule. Corruption soared, the economy collapsed, and trust in the government evaporated. In 1967, a military coup broke the illusion of stability. But it was in the 1990s that things truly fell apart. As the civil war raged, rebels and rogue military officers regularly seized power. In 1992, a group of junior officers, led by 25-year-old Valentine Strasser, overthrew the government and became Africa's youngest head of state. The 1997 coup that followed saw soldiers ally with rebels to form a bizarre and violent joint regime. It took British military intervention to restore order, but even after the war, political tensions remained high. With 7 successful coups, Sierra Leone's modern democracy was born not through elections, but through fire, blood, and global pressure. At number 3 is Togo, the country that hosted Africa's first post-independence presidential assassination, setting a tragic standard for the continent. In 1963, just 3 years after independence, President Sylvanus Olympio was gunned down outside the US Embassy during a military coup. The man behind it, Etienne Gnassingbé Eyadema, who would go on to rule Togo for 38 years after staging his own coup in 1967. Eyadema created a cult of personality, building statues of himself, rewriting the constitution, and ensuring that the army remained loyal to him above all else. He survived multiple coup attempts and consolidated power through a vast military security apparatus. When he died in 2005, the army illegally installed his son, for Nasibe, as president, a move that drew widespread condemnation but was later legalized through elections. With a legacy of dynastic rule and 16 coup-related events, Togo remains a nation where democracy has long played second fiddle to military control. At number 2 is Burkina Faso, the undisputed king of successful coups in Africa, with 11 out of 17 attempts hitting their target. Originally known as Upper Volta, the country had its first coup in 1966, but the world really took notice in 1983 when a charismatic young soldier named Thomas Sankara seized power and launched a radical anti-imperialist revolution. He renamed the country Burkina Faso, meaning land of upright people, and implemented sweeping reforms on health, women's rights, and land use. Sankara's time in power was short-lived. He was assassinated in 1987 during a coup led by his former ally, Blaise Compaoré, who ruled for the next 27 years. Compaoré was ousted in 2014 by a popular uprising, and since then, the country has experienced even more coups, including 2 in 2022 alone. These were driven by mounting insecurity and extremist violence in the north, with the military claiming that only it could restore order. Burkina Faso has become the face of Africa's modern coup wave, a place where the government is replaced, not through ballots, but through barracks. And finally, at number 1, the undisputed heavyweight of coups is Sudan, with a mind-blowing 31 coup-related events since 1956. Sudan's first coup came just 2 years after independence in 1958. Since then, every single democratic breakthrough has been crushed by the military. The country has swung between fleeting civilian governments and long-standing military dictatorships. In 1989, Omar al-Bashir seized power and ruled for 30 years, overseeing mass atrocities, civil war, and international sanctions. He was finally toppled in 2019 after massive protests, but just 2 years later, the military was back in charge. And then in 2023, Sudan plunged into civil war, not between civilians and soldiers, but between two rival military factions, the army and the paramilitary rapid support forces. Entire cities were destroyed, thousands were killed, and Sudan was left with no functioning government. With 31 total coup events, Sudan doesn't just lead Africa, it stands at the very top of the global coup rankings. From civil wars and assassinations to power-hungry elites, these 10 countries show how deeply coups have shaped African history. But they also show something else: the resilience of African people and their hunger for peace, accountability, and democratic rule. Which of these countries shocked you the most? Comment below, and if you learned something new, like, share, and subscribe for more content on Africa. Thank you for watching. See you next time.